Hello and welcome back to Jack Knives Reviews. I'm of course your host, Jack Knives. Today we'll be looking at a Netflix exclusive movie based on a true story, Woman of the Hour. In 1978, aspiring actress Cheryl Bradshaw gets an opportunity on the hottest game show, The Dating Game. However, what she and the world will find out is the third bachelor is active serial killer Rodney Alcala, or as he would later be known, the Dating Game Killer. There were two movies that I wanted to talk about originally for Jack-O-Ween, but I felt that they weren't necessarily horror as much as they were thrillers. No Evil, and this one, Woman of the Hour, based off of the very, very famous Dating Game Killer case. And specifically, Miss Bradshaw, who was the participant in the dating game show. And I had a lot of issues with it. So my major problem with the movie is that it's not accurate to the case. There's broad elements to it that do reflect well on the case, that do highlight certain things. But it's so much stuff that they got wrong that it's practically not even remotely close to what happened. I think the biggest problem I had with this was because I, as a person who loves true crime, was so familiar with the Rodney Alcala case that I expected to see more true to form as far as it pertains to the story of the Dating Game Killer. More to do with how it would have affected her. How, knowing what we know now, and how shortly after he was captured, and how that could have affected her, or things like that. You know, dive into the almost victim that is the main lead, the main character, the main processing. We don't really ever get that. In fact, Anna Kendrick herself said this is not a faithful adaptation of the story of the Rodney Alcala case. To which I respond with, then why the hell did you make it? You could have just made an original movie. Instead, the movie really wanted to push this feministic ideology that, while good intentioned, was not accurate, especially to the times. And considering this took place in the mid-70s, you can quite literally pull up clips on game shows from the mid-70s. They were so objectifying towards women, sexualizing, misogynistic towards women. So the idea of a woman going, oh, no, that wasn't how they were in the 70s, especially out and out. The reason we have these ideologies now is because of the disgustingness of the past. You had Anna Kendrick's character, Miss Bradshaw, who is based off of the real Miss Bradshaw who was on the Dating Game, and she didn't play her. I mean, truthfully, I've studied the Rodney Alcala case so much that I know so much of it that's seen as dated and goofy at the time, such as the segments in the Dating Game that were actually broadcasted. But if you look at it, the context at the time, they're gross, they're weird, they're kind of risque, but that's how the game was. The game was literally flirting. That's why it's called the Dating Game. You win an opportunity for a date. And so this whole thing of her treating it like it's a job interview, I'm like, it's weird. Also, the fact that the guy they got to play the host was this sleazeball, disgusting, misogynistic ass. And I'm like, the original Dating Game host was never like that. In all accounts, he was actually a very sweet, caring, nice person. In fact, he was constantly made fun of because he was so nice. Hell, the original host of Family Feud, Richard Dawson, would literally kiss every single woman who came on his show. That's not hyperbole. That's just straight up fact. You can look up yourself. So this notion that this this woman would come on a 70s show about dating and be like, oh, no, 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 haha, tisk, tisk. So if you were to look back at old game shows at the time, they didn't really have this notion of tisk, tisk, don't you talk that way about women. And because of how disgusting and gross it was, that's why the feminist movement had to shift, and we see now how wrong it is. It's the same reason we look at movies from the 60s and 70s, and you hear a lot of boomers saying, well, it was just normalized at the time. That didn't mean it was bad. It's like, it was bad. It's just that no one really called it out because it was so normalized. It just became the result of, it is what it is. Now we live in a society where we could actually call things out for being disgusting, and yet people constantly use the term canceled. I don't personally believe anything could be canceled unless there's something to be canceled for. So it goes back to the old, there ain't no smoke without no fire. But back to the movie itself. One of the other big issues I had was it was inaccurate so much that to me, it kind of just got under my skin. Trying not to nitpick it too much, but for example, in the audience there's a woman who apparently was a friend of one of the previous victims of Rodney Alcala. That never happened. In fact, at the time that they were doing the dating game show, not only was Rodney Alcala being investigated, he was already a registered sex offender. That's how lax they were back then about their regulations and background checks. In fact, a lot of people believed if he hadn't gone on the dating game show, the FBI may not have been able to catch him as easily as they did. Tony Hale plays the game show host, and he has this good balance of this weaselly, dark, twisted game show host who's just kind of like, all right, which again, wouldn't really bother me in a normal movie. Back to the big issue. When you base something off of a true story, you want it to be as close to as accurate as possible, especially if you're involving deaths and serial killers and victims and tons of other things. Anna Kendrick does writing and directing and starring in this movie. And I think she does a good job as far as directing. The visuals, the aesthetic, the costume design, lighting, all of it looks great. It looks fantastic, and it feels very out of the 70s, which is one of the reasons I wanted to watch this. But the fact that she butchered the true story in order to fit her narrative really shows her willingness to just throw out reality and just make up whatever she wants. And her acting, well, she's basically just playing Anna Kendrick, so she doesn't really do so much as a naive young girl, which you'd think if you're juggling that many hats, you'd actually be focused more on your performance than you would be on the rest of the show, but it doesn't really seem to be the case here. But there are some good things about this movie, and the main one being Daniel Zavato's performance as Rodney Alcala. He has this great balance of being creepy, yet intriguing, enticing, and yet affirmative. He has a really good balance where you could see someone not only being afraid of this person, but also being intrigued enough to want to keep conversating with them. It's the subtleties. And that performance that he puts into this is so damn good. It actually elevates the movie to a level I don't think it's really able to aspire to. The best parts of the movie are everything not having to do with the main lead. Every time it focused on Rodney and his other victims, knowing what we know now, it feels and goes off of the old school Alfred Hitchcock bomb under the table principle. If you're not familiar with the bomb under the table principle, you take a scenario where two people are talking and they're just sitting at a table, and underneath the table is a bomb. You, the audience, see the bomb under the table. You see the two people talking. Now there's tension, and we're scared for them. But then take the same example and one of them knows there's a bomb under the table, and they're trying to calmly leave the table before it goes off. That is the bomb under the table example. Daniel Zavato plays it really, really well. And those segments probably save an otherwise okay average thriller. I tried so hard to enjoy this movie. I really did. And I was really looking forward to it. Wanted an accurate, at least somewhat accurate depiction of the dating game killer's victims and how they were portrayed. And to an extent, they do. The times where it shows some of his escapees, his victims, his way of enticing them, and his capture, and things like that, all great. And I wanted more of that. But I would have even been happy if they had shown Miss Bradshaw as this scared, naive girl who basically regains herself and goes like, wait a minute. I gotta listen to my gut instincts and back away, because that's what she actually did. She never went on a date with Rodney Alcala. Felt this insane vibe, and because one of the other bachelors who had heard how disturbing and disgusting he was behind the scenes had warned her, and she just got this gut feeling of, I'm not going to be around him. You could have played off of that. You could have played off of, he didn't want to go out with him. She didn't really see anything with him, and she was just felt this really unnerving feeling, and then her eventually backing out. Only you could have shown the part that we've never seen, and that is, what was her reaction upon finding out he was the killer? He was a serial killer, and she almost was one of his victims. How would that affect her? How would she regain herself? How would she figure out who she is? Was she supposed to be a victim? Was it all circumstantial? It's a series of questions that the movie never answers, and it doesn't ever leave anything with us to keep going as far as a good story outside of, okay, this is kind of a adaptation, kind of, sort of, but you're better off just watching a documentary about it. And it really feels weird that I had very little expectations for Speak No Evil, and I liked it a lot. And I had a pretty decent amount of expectations for this, and I felt really disappointed. But them's the way of things. I give Woman of the Hour 2.5 out of 5. Have you seen Woman of the Hour? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I'll see you next time.